Welcome to Rare Coins Numix. If you've got some old quarters lying around, this video could be a game changer. We're counting down the rarest Washington quarters ever made. Watch till the end, because the final one is a true showstopper. It was the dead of winter. A silence lay over the snow-covered banks of the Delaware River, broken only by the faint sounds of men and horses preparing for something almost unthinkable. The year was 1776, and the American Revolution was on the brink of collapse. General George Washington, facing overwhelming odds, had suffered defeat after defeat. Morale was low. Supplies were scarce. And yet, in one of the most daring acts of leadership in American military history, he resolved to lead his ragged army across the treacherous, ice-choked Delaware River. By candlelight and freezing moonlight, with sleet lashing their faces and the darkness thick with uncertainty, Washington and his men launched the surprise attack that would become legendary. That moment, now etched into American consciousness as one of courage and determination, would eventually be captured not only in paintings and books but also in the most unlikely of places. A 25-cent coin, the 2021 Washington crossing the Delaware quarter isn't just another piece of change jingling in a vending machine tray. It's a time capsule in metal, a tribute to a singular moment that shifted the fate of a nation. Released quietly into circulation, it was a coin rooted in deep history but launched in the present. To hold one is to hold a reminder of sacrifice, vision, and the fine line between victory and failure. When the U.S. Mint released the coin in early 2021, it marked more than just the beginning of a new design. It signified a return. After years of the 50-state quarters in America the Beautiful series, collectors and history enthusiasts were ready for something different, something meaningful. The design team went back to the roots, back to the origins of the struggle for independence, and chose that frigid December night as the story to tell. The obverse of the coin features a restored version of John Flanagan's iconic 1932 portrait of George Washington. There's a quiet dignity in that face, his gaze steady, his posture composed. It's a classic profile, but for this coin, it feels particularly fitting. This isn't just any quarter, it needed a symbol of leadership and resolve, but it's the reverse that truly steals the show. There, Washington is shown standing proudly at the bow of the boat, his sword in hand, surrounded by determined soldiers braving the elements. The artist captured motion in stillness, the rushing water, the wind in his coat, the tension of a mission that could change everything. You can almost feel the cold, the bite of the wind, the wetness in their boots, the weight of hope. It's a scene that speaks across centuries. People who first saw the coin in hand noted how striking it looked, especially compared to other recent designs. It had an energy, a story carved into metal. And that energy, that detail, that historical gravity, made people look twice. It stirred something in collectors old and new. Forums buzzed. YouTube videos speculated. Coin shops began to display them proudly. But beneath all that excitement was a more subtle truth: this wasn't just about beauty. This was about value. Like all modern quarters, the coin was minted in large numbers, hundreds of millions across the Philadelphia and Denver mints. But not all coins are created equal. Some were struck with more precision. Some emerged with errors. Some were kept safe in pristine rolls, untouched by the wear of circulation. And that's where things started to get interesting. Collectors know that the story of a coin doesn't stop at its design. It continues in condition, in rarity, in the unexpected anomalies that turn a piece of metal into something truly valuable. The 2021 quarter saw its fair share of those moments. Coins in mint state 68 and 69, nearly perfect examples, were identified and certified. And with that certification came increasing interest. Prices began to climb. What started as a curious historical tribute began to emerge as a genuine collector's prize. Proof versions were struck at the San Francisco Mint, including special silver proofs with a mirror-like finish and sharp, frosted details. These coins were never meant for circulation. They were carefully made for collectors, packaged with care, and stored as keepsakes. Their craftsmanship showed. When held under the light, these proofs reflect not just the artistry of the mint but the gravity of the scene they depict. And then came the errors. Some coins showed doubling, letters and numbers that appeared blurred or shadowed. Others had die chips, tiny raised bumps caused by cracks in the dies. There were off-center strikes, weak edges, even dramatic misalignments. For some, these would be flaws. For collectors, these were treasures. They represented imperfection born from speed, a moment where the machine faltered, and in doing so, created something rare. As the months passed, more people began paying attention. Videos circulated showing viewers how to spot valuable examples. Dealers began offering higher bounties for coins in exceptional grades. A few auction results turned heads. There were whispers of coins going for hundreds, then thousands. Of course, not every coin from 2021 carries value. Most, still, are worth their face value. But hidden among them, in rolls, in drawers, in forgotten change jars, are the outliers. The pristine examples. The anomalies. The ones that bring the past to life and ignite a bidding war today. The buzz became undeniable. Coin grading services began seeing a noticeable uptick in submissions of the 2021 quarter. Collectors who had dismissed it as just another release were now giving it a second look. Word spread not just because of speculation, but because of the weight behind the design. The narrative. The reminder of a nation on the edge, and a leader who acted anyway. People have always been drawn to the underdog. And in many ways, the story of this coin mirrors the very story it honors: a gamble, a turning point, a symbol of endurance. It represents the unexpected win. The long shot that pays off. Some coins have value because of gold or silver content. Others because of their age. But the 2021 crossing the Delaware quarter. It earned its value through something else, a perfect storm of design, history, and rarity. So, now you might be wondering, what's the number? What's the figure that collectors have paid to own this piece of numismatic history in its finest form, in its most flawless, pristine, high-grade state, whether it's a perfect mint strike, a rare error variant, or a deeply mirrored silver proof? This small quarter, born in 2021, has sold for as much as $13,000. Imagine it's the early 1990s. A new decade has just begun. The Cold War has ended, the Berlin Wall has fallen, and America is stepping confidently into a future shaped by technology, globalization, and rapid change. It's a time of transformation, not only in politics and pop culture, but also in the small, everyday things, like the coins in your pocket. Among them, unnoticed by most, the 1992 United States quarter dollar quietly enters circulation. Just another piece of loose change, right? But, like so many things that seem ordinary on the surface, this coin hides a story much bigger than its face value. To the average person, the 1992 quarter is easy to overlook. You'd recognize it immediately: George Washington's familiar profile on the obverse, unwavering, steady, proud. The design, by John Flanagan, had already been a staple of U.S. coinage since 1932, minted to honor the bicentennial of Washington's birth. But in 1992, something subtle was shifting. What looked like the same old coin carried with it a brewing storm in the world of numismatics. At a glance, nothing about the 1992 quarter seems particularly remarkable. It was minted in large numbers, at the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and, for proof coins, at the San Francisco Mint. Hundreds of millions were produced that year. People used them to buy coffee, pay parking meters, collect dust in kitchen drawers. But as with many stories worth telling, the real magic lies in the exceptions. In 1992, the U.S. Mint did something it hadn't done before: it began quietly transitioning its proof coins to a new composition. Since the 1960s, after the elimination of silver from general circulation coins, quarters had been struck in a copper-nickel clad. But in 1992, the Mint began producing 90% silver proof sets again for collectors, something that hadn't been done in decades. These silver proofs were sold in special sets and weren't meant to be mixed with circulation coins. But as it sometimes happens, a few of these silver quarters, or planchets intended to be silver quarters, found their way into the wrong place, and that's where this story begins to twist. Somewhere along the line, a small number of 1,992 quarters were struck on the wrong planchets, silver ones, rather than the standard clad ones. These errors went unnoticed at first, slipping into circulation like whispers in a crowd. It wasn't until years later, when sharp-eyed collectors began studying these coins more carefully, that the anomaly was discovered. A 1992 quarter that felt just a little heavier. That had a different ring when dropped. That reacted differently to a magnet. That glowed slightly brighter in the light. Tests confirmed the truth. These were not ordinary quarters. They were silver, struck on the wrong metal, not intended for circulation. Their existence was unintentional, accidental, and extremely rare. And that made them special. Very special. Coin collectors love a good mystery. They love the hunt. And nothing sparks excitement like a rare error that wasn't supposed to exist. These silver 1992 quarters became legends in the numismatic community. Not many were found. Maybe a few dozen. Maybe fewer. No one knows exactly how many are still out there, waiting to be discovered in old collections, junk drawers, forgotten piggy banks. The rarity created demand. The demand created value. And the value skyrocketed. Even without the error, the 1992 quarter carries appeal for collectors. It was one of the last years before the coinage world would dramatically change with the introduction of the 50-state quarters program in 1999. From 1932 to 1998, the reverse of the quarter remained virtually unchanged, an eagle, wings spread, perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below. A symbol of strength, peace, readiness. But 1992 was one of the last years of that design era. A final chapter before a wave of commemorative quarters changed everything. Collectors also appreciate 1992 for its transitional qualities. The mint was experimenting. Quality control was shifting. The introduction of the silver proof sets meant that new mistakes could be made. And some of those mistakes, like the silver 1992 quarter struck with circulation dyes, became goldmines for those lucky enough to find them. The coin's appeal goes deeper, though. It's not just about rarity. It's about the idea that something so common, something you've held hundreds of times without a second thought, could suddenly become priceless. It's about looking closer. Paying attention. It's about the romance of treasure hunting in plain sight. Because you never know what you might find if you really, really look. The most prized examples of the 1992 quarter are those rare silver errors, especially ones in high condition, uncirculated, untouched by time. When certified by reputable grading companies, these coins become objects of desire. Auction houses list them. Bidding wars erupt. Collectors set alerts, search daily, and wait years to find one. There are stories, rumors, even, of people finding these coins in the most unexpected places. In inherited coin jars, in rolls purchased from the bank, in collections passed down from grandparents. Sometimes, it's the simple act of weighing a coin, or seeing the way the light hits it, that reveals the truth. And when it does, everything changes. There's a kind of poetry to it. That a coin worth 25 cents could, by a stroke of luck and time, become a treasure worth thousands. That history, error, and perseverance could combine to turn pocket change into a life-changing find. It's the kind of story that keeps collectors up at night, sifting through rolls, checking edges, holding coins to their ear and listening for that telltale silver ring. And now, after all of that, the history, the design, the error, the discovery, the chase, comes the moment everyone wants to hear. The number. The value. The answer to the question people ask when they see a coin collector going through hundreds of quarters with a magnifying glass: how much can a single quarter, struck in 1992, no bigger than a bottle cap, be worth today, if it's one of those legendary silver errors, in pristine condition, certified, verified, and fully appreciated for the gem it truly is? That coin, just 25 cents at birth, has now sold for as much as $97,000. The 1983 quarter. A coin so common, so overlooked, that millions have passed through our hands without a second thought. It has no shimmer of gold, no flash of silver. There's no fanfare, no inscription that hints at limited minting, no commemorative twist. It's the kind of coin that's tossed into tip jars, jammed into vending machines, forgotten in couch cushions. And yet, despite its unassuming appearance, this one humble piece of currency has become one of the most hunted, studied, and obsessively collected quarters in all of modern American coinage. Not for what it looks like, but for what it hides. To understand why this ordinary-looking coin became so extraordinary, we have to go back to the moment of its creation. The year was 1983. America was a nation of contradictions. The economy was healing after years of inflation and recession. Personal computers were beginning to creep into households. Star Wars returned to theaters. Compact discs were being introduced to the music world. And the American public, with one eye on the Cold War and another on cable television, moved forward into a rapidly changing world. In the middle of it all, the U.S. Mint did what it always did, it struck coins. Millions of them. In 1983 alone, more than 1 billion quarters were produced between the Philadelphia and Denver mints. They rolled off presses at astonishing speeds, destined for wallets, cash registers, and toll booths across the country. Most of them were never looked at twice. But 1983 wasn't like other years. Because in 1983, the Mint made a quiet decision, one that would transform the status of that year's coins for decades to come. That year, the United States Mint opted not to release official mint sets. No collector-grade, uncirculated sets of coins would be sold to the public. No special packaging. No guaranteed pristine strike sealed in cellophane. Just business as usual, coins struck for circulation and sent directly into the world. And that subtle absence would later turn the 1983 quarter into a numismatic anomaly. Because collectors, in the decades that followed, would find themselves facing a rare truth: it was nearly impossible to find a perfect 1983 quarter. There were no untouched examples, no stockpile of preserved coins tucked away in mint-issued folders. Every single coin was born into circulation, and from the moment it hit the real world, it began to degrade. Over time, this absence of uncirculated specimens became significant. Coin collectors' treasure condition. The difference between a coin worth face value and one worth thousands can come down to a tiny scratch, a faint blemish, a hint of wear. And the 1983 quarter, by nature of its release, was nearly always found worn, scratched, or damaged. But it wasn't just condition that set this coin apart, because hidden within the mountain of 1983 quarters, there were a select few that bore an error, one that would elevate their value beyond anything the Mint ever imagined. The error was subtle. It wasn't a missing mint mark or an obvious misstrike. It was a double die, an error that occurred during the creation of the coin's reverse die, where a misalignment caused certain elements of the design to be imprinted twice. For most people, the effect was invisible. But under magnification, the doubling became clear, most notably in the inscription E pluribus unum, where the letters appeared shadowed, ghosted, slightly split. It was a telltale sign of a minting error that slipped past inspection. This wasn't damage. It wasn't caused by wear. It was in the coin's DNA. A flaw at the moment of creation, known today as the 1983 PDDR, double die reverse, this variety became an instant object of fascination for numismatists. But fascination alone doesn't create value. Scarcity does. And that's where this story becomes truly remarkable, because very few examples of this double die coin have ever been found. Even fewer in mint state. And virtually none in top-end, uncirculated condition. This was a perfect storm, an error so precise it escaped detection, combined with a year that offered no protected mint sets, and a coin that was only distributed for everyday use. For decades, the 1983 PDDR went unnoticed. Buried among billions. Waiting, but the moment collectors caught on, the chase began. Coin dealers started scouring rolls of old quarters, searching for that delicate doubling. Collectors pored over boxes of coins under magnifiers and microscopes, holding their breath at each curve of the letters. Stories emerged of backyard collectors finding them in piggy banks, of elderly numismatists discovering them in old rolls sealed away in safes. Auctions began featuring them. Grading services began certifying them. The coin that had once been worthless outside its face value suddenly had a spotlight, but even among these rare DDR finds, the true prize remained elusive, a perfect, untouched 1983 PDDR in high mint state. One that had somehow escaped not just circulation, but time itself. The search grew more intense. Submissions to grading companies increased. Forums and communities lit up with rumors, leads, and hopeful discoveries. The dream was no longer just to find the coin, it was to find the best one. The appeal of the 1983 quarter, especially the DDR, goes beyond the numbers. It taps into the core of what collecting is about, the search for the extraordinary in the ordinary. A forgotten coin in an ashtray. A dusty roll purchased at a pawn shop. A childhood collection that sat in a box for decades. The idea that history, real, valuable history, could be sitting inches from you right now, unnoticed, is what makes this coin legendary. It also symbolizes something deeper. In 1983, there were no advantages for collectors. No pristine sets handed out by the government. No silver variants. No proof coins from the Philadelphia Mint. Nothing to indicate that this year would someday matter. And yet, it did. The very absence of special treatment is what made the 1983 quarter so important. It was a coin born into struggle. One that had to fight through the chaos of circulation, error, and time to prove its worth, and prove it, it did. Collectors today consider the 1983 P-double die reverse quarter to be one of the crown jewels of modern U.S. coinage. Its value comes from rarity, yes, but also from survival. The coin stands as a testament to the idea that not all treasures come wrapped in gold foil. Sometimes, they're tossed in a junk drawer or left behind in an old coffee tin, waiting for the right eyes to see them. Every time a 1983 quarter passes through your hands, there's a sliver of a chance, tiny, but real, that you're holding one of the rarest modern quarters ever made. And that is the kind of magic collectors live for. And now, the question you've been waiting for. What is it worth? What is the real value of a 1983 quarter, specifically, a pristine, high-grade, certified example of the 1983 P-double die reverse, one of the few surviving in near-perfect condition, preserved against all odds, holding in its tiny form a story of error, mystery, scarcity, and rediscovery? That coin, struck for a mere 25 cents in a year most collectors almost skipped over entirely, has now sold for an astonishing $113,000. The year was 1965. A pivotal moment in American history. The nation was in the middle of great social change. Civil rights marches filled the streets. The Vietnam War escalated. Martin Luther King Jr. led movements that would shape the future of the country. Meanwhile, in homes across America, television sets flickered with images of astronauts, protests, and pop culture icons. The Beatles were rising. So was inflation. And in the background of all this movement and momentum, something fundamental was changing, something so small, most people didn't even notice it at first. That it was the end of silver in circulating American coins. For over a century, U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars had been made from 90% silver. They didn't just represent value, they were value. But by the early 1960s, the price of silver was climbing fast. Coin hoarding was on the rise. People were pulling silver coins out of circulation, keeping them in drawers, boxes, and coffee cans, knowing instinctively they were worth more than face value. Banks ran short of coins. The Treasury grew concerned. And so in 1965, the United States Mint made a radical decision: silver would be removed from circulating quarters and dimes. The new coins, starting that year, would be made from a copper-nickel clad. To the public, they looked almost identical. But to collectors, investors, and those paying attention, the shift was monumental. It marked the beginning of a new era, and, unknowingly, it set the stage for one of the rarest and most valuable coin errors in modern history. The Washington quarter, which had featured the same basic design since 1932, now looked unchanged on the surface. The obverse still bore the stately profile of George Washington, created by sculptor John Flanagan. The reverse still showed the majestic eagle, wings spread over a bundle of arrows, framed by olive branches. But beneath the design, everything had changed. No longer composed of 90% silver, the 1965 quarter was now layered, an outer shell of copper-nickel alloy over a core of pure copper. It weighed slightly more. It sounded slightly different. But to the average person, it was just another quarter. That's what made the mistake so easy to miss. During the transition from silver to clad, the mint faced the massive logistical challenge of converting its entire coin production system. And in the rush, a few silver planchets, intended for the previous year's 1964 quarters, were accidentally left behind in the machinery. These silver blanks were struck with 1965 dated dies. A simple oversight. A mechanical error. But one with consequences that would ripple for decades. The result was the birth of a legendary rarity, the 1965 Washington quarter struck on a 90% silver planchet. To most eyes, these era coins were indistinguishable from the new clad version. They bore the same design. They had no mint mark. They circulated quietly alongside millions of clad coins. But over time, keen-eyed collectors began to notice subtle differences. A brighter sheen. A slightly different sound when dropped. And most telling of all, a lower weight. While the new clad quarters weighed 5.67 grams, the silver ones weighed about 6.25 grams. That slight variation became the first clue, and so the hunt began. At first, the existence of these silver 1965 quarters was debated. Some thought they were myths, rumors, or misidentifications. But slowly, carefully, verified examples began to surface. Tested. Weighed. Analyzed. Certified. The truth became clear: a tiny number of 1965 quarters had been struck on leftover silver blanks. No one knew exactly how many. But everyone knew they were rare. Not only rare, but historically significant. They represented a turning point. A bridge between two monetary systems. A flaw in the transition that the mint had tried so carefully to manage. And for collectors, they were irresistible. A genuine silver coin with a date that officially should never appear on silver. A contradiction. A numismatic mystery. A fragment of a lost era, captured forever in metal. These silver era quarters became the subject of intense interest. Collectors began weighing their coins. Dealers started issuing public calls, asking people to check their old pocket change, their piggy banks, their inherited jars. It became an obsession. How many of these coins were still out there? How many had been spent unknowingly, mistaken for ordinary clad quarters and lost to time? The truth is, no one knows. That uncertainty only adds to the allure. And when a verified silver 1965 quarter appears today, it causes a stir. Collectors compete fiercely for them. The grading is scrutinized. The weight, the luster, the strike, all examined under microscopic detail. Because the value isn't just in the silver content. It's in the story. The error. The survival. The whisper of history it carries. It's not just a matter of rarity. It's about defiance. These coins defy logic. Defy expectations. They invite curiosity. They embody mystery. And they reward those who are willing to look deeper. Who are willing to question the ordinary. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary stories are hiding in plain sight, and so, every 1965 quarter becomes a possibility. Every one you pick up could be something more. A mistake. A relic. A treasure. You wouldn't know just by looking. But if you weigh it, if you test it, measure it, examine its shine, listen to its ring, you might just discover that your ordinary change is anything but. And now, after all the history, after the facts, the myths, and the remarkable survival of a coin that should not exist, comes the one question that lingers in the minds of everyone watching. What is it worth? What is the real, tangible value of a 1965 silver quarter, one of the rarest transitional era coins in American history, authenticated, certified, and preserved in exceptional condition? That coin, struck in silence during a time of change, accidentally bridging two eras of American currency, has now sold for an astonishing $131,000.